The first year after my death, my daughter was diagnosed with a terminal illness. The orphanage director called Adrian Lancaster, saying she needed $50,000 to survive. He was holding Cassandra Vale in his arms, twirling a strand of her hair around his finger, his expression indifferent. Don't treat her. If she dies, she dies. It just means she can go join her short-lived mother in the afterlife. In the end, my daughter passed away in the orphanage because there was no money for her treatment. The director called Adrian again, but this time his voice was filled with irritation. Oh, so she actually died this time? A day after Lily Sinclair's death, Adrian Lancaster finally arrived at the orphanage. It had been a year since I last saw him. His expression was even colder than before, and in his hands he carried large bags filled with baby supplies. A sharp pain pierced through my heart. No wonder he had taken so long to come. His new wife was already expecting a child. Seeing the orphanage director, Adrian's voice was laced with impatience. Where's that little brat's body? Didn't you call me repeatedly to come and collect it? The director, wiping away her tears, hesitated before leading him to the room where Lily's body was being kept. Adrian stepped forward, lifted the white sheet covering my daughter, glanced briefly at her face and then laughed. Not bad. This fake corpse looks quite realistic. Evelyn Sinclair must have paid you a lot to stage this. The director's face darkened and she snapped back at him, her voice filled with anger. Mr. Lancaster, Lily is truly gone. If it weren't for the fact that we need a legal guardian's signature for her cremation, I wouldn't have bothered to call you. But Adrian ignored her completely. Instead, he turned to Lily's lifeless form and sneered. Looks like even in death she didn't mean much to her mother. Evelyn Sinclair hasn't even shown up. My chest tightened with grief. Adrian, it's not that I don't want to appear. It's that I already died a year ago. Yet for some reason, even after death, my soul remained by my daughter's side. Countless nights, I watched helplessly as she curled up in pain, her tiny body trembling as she sobbed my name. And her father, her own flesh and blood, was out there living a new life with another woman, nurturing another child. To Adrian, Lily was never his daughter. He was just a burden. A piece of trash he had been trying to get rid of. Adrian Lancaster's voice dragged me back from my thoughts. Now that the little brat is dead, I can take the body, right? Then, without hesitation, he stepped outside, answered a call, and without so much as a glance, tossed Lily's lifeless body into the dumpster. Not only that, but he even instructed his bodyguards to head to a pet shop and buy some hungry stray dogs. I froze. When I finally realized what he was doing, I rushed toward the dumpster in a panic, desperately trying to pull Lily's body out. He actually wanted my daughter to be torn apart even after death. No matter how much I struggled, my hands passed right through the objects around me. I could only watch in horror as the hungry dogs, their mouths drooling, slowly approached Lily's tiny, lifeless form. From the side, Adrian smirked coldly, muttering under his breath. Trash belongs in the trash. Evelyn Sinclair, the child you abandoned, why would you ever think I would want her? Despair surged through me, flooding my entire being. I screamed at the top of my lungs. Adrian Lancaster, that is your daughter. The starving dogs lunged forward, tearing into Lily's fragile body. The moment I saw the blood splatter across the cold pavement, I felt like my soul was being ripped apart. For a fleeting second, a strange look crossed Adrian's face, almost as if he had heard something. But in the next instant, his expression hardened once more. That prop really does look realistic. Too bad the little brat is actually dead. I don't even feel the slightest bit of regret. He turned away, his tone as sharp as ever. Just like her mother. Both of them should have been erased from my life long ago. Only when Lily's body was completely mangled and unrecognizable did Adrian finally avert his gaze, satisfied. At that moment, the orphanage director rushed out in a panic. When she saw what was happening, she stood frozen in shock, unable to believe her eyes. She raised a trembling finger, pointing at Adrian. But Adrian merely looked at her with indifference, his expression composed as if he had everything under control. Tell Evelyn Sinclair this. If she truly wants custody, she better stop hiding and come see me. These little tricks won't fool me. His voice grew colder, more menacing. In a few days, it'll be my mother's death anniversary. If Evelyn doesn't show up, I won't mind making sure that brat stays truly dead. He bit down on the word truly, his tone dripping with malice. To others it might have sounded like an empty threat. But I knew him too well. He wasn't joking. For the first time since Lily's death, a sense of relief washed over me. Perhaps it was a good thing she was gone. She no longer had to suffer. The orphanage director was speechless. Before she could say anything more, Adrian turned on his heel and left, his bodyguards following closely behind. And I, bound by an unseen force, could do nothing but follow him. His car pulled up in front of a luxurious mansion. As soon as he stepped out, a woman with a heavily pregnant belly rushed toward him, her face filled with excitement. A figure. Something about it felt eerily familiar. As she drew closer and wrapped her arms around Adrian, realization struck me like lightning. I finally remembered who she was. Cassandra Vale. Cassandra Vale. The woman who had tormented me for years. Back when Adrian Lancaster and I were together, she had done everything in her power to humiliate me, calling me a worthless piece of trash who didn't deserve him. She even came to my workplace pretending to be a patient, only to spread rumors that I was an incompetent doctor. At one point she even tried to have my hands crippled so I would never be able to perform surgery again. When Adrian found out, he had been furious. He had his company suppress the Vale family's business, even going so far as to warn her father. If she dared trouble me again, he wouldn't hesitate to ruin their entire family. That day her father had no choice but to lock her away. And yet now she was here, clinging to Adrian, carrying his child. She reached up to touch his face, her eyes filled with worry. "Adrian, where did you go? Why did you come home so late?" His gaze softened as he gently patted her back. "Just had some things to take care of." My fists clenched at my sides. I knew exactly what kind of things he had been dealing with. The corpse of his own daughter, the one he had tossed away like garbage. The very same daughter Cassandra had always wanted dead. As they spoke, Cassandra suddenly hesitated. Her fingers tightened around Adrian's sleeve, her voice turning cautious. What if she really is dead? I stiffened. What was she talking about? Dryan's expression remained calm, as if this conversation was of no significance to him. The bodyguard told me that Brat was perfectly fine. This is just another one of Evelyn Sinclair's pathetic tricks. But Cassandra's face paled slightly and she bit her lip. But Adrian, what if she really is dead? I could feel my non-existent heart tightening as I stared at Adrian, waiting for his answer. Once, a long time ago, Adrian had been the kind of man who panicked whenever Lily had even a slight fever. I still remember how he would hold her in his arms all night, worried sick. Back then he had told me, "You and Lily are the most important people in my life." But now his voice was cold, indifferent. The next morning, Cassandra Vale suddenly clutched her stomach, her face twisting in pain. Adrian Lancaster panicked immediately, scooping her into his arms and rushing her to the hospital. After hours of labor, she gave birth to a baby girl. A child with the same delicate features as Adrian, a miniature version of him. For the first time in years, I saw the warmth return to his eyes. He held the newborn gently, unwilling to let go for even a second. He looked just like the Adrian I used to know. The man who once held Lily with the same tenderness, the man who swore she was the most precious thing in his life. But now my Lily was gone. She hadn't even been buried yet, and he was already showering his love on another child. As he gazed lovingly at his newborn daughter, his phone suddenly rang. The call was from his secretary. "Mr. Lancaster, I'm sorry, but there's an urgent situation at the company. You need to come in immediately." Adrian frowned but reluctantly put the baby down beside Cassandra, his voice gentle. "Be good. Don't trouble your mother. If you misbehave, I won't go easy on you just because you're small." A bolt of lightning seemed to strike my soul. My mind reeled, struggling to process his words. Did he just say that? The very same words he once said to Lily, the daughter he had abandoned. Back then, it had been nothing more than a playful joke, a little teasing between father and daughter. But now, when I heard him say the exact same thing to Cassandra's child, it felt like a knife stabbing through my soul. How could he say that? How could he repeat those words as if Lily had never existed? As if she had never mattered? Before Adrian could leave, a doctor entered the room holding a stack of medical reports. His expression was serious. "Mr. Lancaster, we ran a few tests on the baby. I'm afraid there's a problem." The room fell into an eerie silence. Adrian's expression darkened instantly. "What problem?" The doctor hesitated before finally speaking. We discovered an issue with her heart. If she doesn't receive a transplant before she turns 3, she might not survive into adulthood. The words hit Adrian like a thunderclap. For a split second, panic flashed across his face. But then just as quickly it disappeared. Instead, he let out a short laugh and spoke in a disturbingly calm voice. "That's fine. I'll take care of it." The doctor looked uncertain. "Mr. Lancaster, finding a compatible heart donor at such a young age is extremely difficult. It has to come from another child under 10 years old, or the transplant might fail." A strange light flickered in Adrian's eyes. Without hesitation, he turned to his bodyguards and gave them a direct order. "Go bring me that little brat." I felt my entire being freeze. I knew exactly who he was talking about. Lily. Even in death, Adrian Lancaster still wanted something from her. I watched helplessly as the bodyguard left the room, heading straight for the place where Lily's body had been discarded. It was as if I could feel every step they took, the horrible fate awaiting my daughter's remains. But what did it matter now? I was already dead, unable to stop Adrian Lancaster from doing whatever he wanted. Soon, the bodyguard returned, holding a cold, lifeless bundle wrapped in cloth. He dropped it carelessly onto the floor in front of Adrian. My heart shattered into pieces. Adrian Lancaster didn't even flinch as he looked down at Lily's remains. With a detached, clinical tone, he ordered, "Prepare the heart for transplant." It was as if she was nothing more than an object, a mere commodity to him. I couldn't help it. My spirit surged forward, desperate to reach my daughter to protect her. But my hands passed through her body, through the bloodied cloth, and I was powerless to do anything. There was a moment of silence in the room, as if Adrian Lancaster had finally realized what he was about to do. His eyes softened for a brief second. He reached out, carefully picking up Lily's lifeless body, cradling it with a tenderness that almost seemed out of place. For a split second, I almost believed that he was actually mourning her. But no, his cold, calculating eyes soon returned. "It's the only way," he muttered to himself, his face hardening again. He looked at the doctor, his voice firm. "Hurry up and prepare everything. I'm not waiting." It was like he was ordering a meal to be delivered on time. As if Lily's death and her remains were nothing but a mere inconvenience for him to deal with. I couldn't stop the tears that welled up in my eyes, even though they couldn't fall. I had loved this man so deeply once. But now I was nothing to him. And neither was Lily. I watched from the shadows, my soul screaming in agony, but I could do nothing. It was as if my very existence had been erased, my connection to this world severed. Adrian Lancaster proceeded without hesitation, the cold, efficient man he had become. He was ordering the death of his own daughter, using her remains as if they were nothing more than a tool for another child's survival. I thought I couldn't feel pain anymore. But in that moment I realized, Lily was my everything. She was all I had ever wanted to protect, all I had lived for. Now she was gone, and so was the man I had loved. After that day I became a silent observer, unable to interact with the living world. It was as if I had been cast aside, just like Lily had been. Adrian Lancaster and Cassandra Vale moved on with their lives, as if nothing had ever happened. They took their newborn daughter, Charlotte Lancaster, home. She was the perfect image of Adrian, everything Lily could never be. I watched from the shadows, helpless as they fawned over her, their love so effortlessly given to this new child. I felt like I was fading further and further away, lost to a world that no longer cared for me or Lily. Then one evening I saw someone I hadn't seen in years. Sebastian Cross, the man who had once been my closest friend. He appeared at the doorstep of Adrian Lancaster's mansion. I had almost forgotten about him, and yet when I saw his familiar face, my heart skipped a beat. Sebastian was no stranger to Adrian and Cassandra. He had been around in the early years of my marriage, but after everything that happened he had distanced himself from me. I knew he had feelings for me, feelings that went deeper than just friendship. He had always supported me even when Adrian treated me cruelly. But that was a long time ago. Now seeing Sebastian Cross again, I felt the weight of my own loneliness. Was it too late for me to reach out to him? Sebastian stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room before settling on Adrian Lancaster and Cassandra Vale. I watched as he stood there, seemingly unsure of what to say, but his gaze was firm. "Adrian Lancaster, I'm here to talk," he said, his voice low but resolute. Adrian turned, his expression cold and dismissive. "What's the matter, Sebastian?" he asked, voice tinged with annoyance. Not here to cause trouble, are you? Sebastian didn't flinch. He met Adrian's gaze with a quiet strength that only seemed to frustrate him further. No, I just need to talk to you about Evelyn and Lily, Sebastian said, his tone serious. I felt a strange surge of emotion at the mention of my name. Would Sebastian finally be the one to tell Adrian the truth? Would he make him see what he had done? Adrian Lancaster's expression twisted in irritation. He stepped forward, his gaze sharp. Talk about what, Sebastian? About how Evelyn tried to ruin my life. How she lied to me about everything. What is there left to talk about? Sebastian Cross didn't falter. He took a deep breath, then spoke with a quiet intensity that filled the room. What if I told you it wasn't Evelyn who killed your mother? The words hit Adrian like a slap to the face. He froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. What did you just say? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sebastian stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. I said it was Cassandra Vale. She's the one who killed your mother. The room seemed to grow colder. I could feel the tension building, the heavy silence almost suffocating. Adrian staggered back, his face contorting in rage. You're lying, he spat. But Sebastian didn't back down. I'm not lying. I have the proof. Cassandra Vale is the one who poisoned your mother. She framed Evelyn for it. For a moment, Adrian Lancaster seemed like he might crumble. His hands shook as he reached for the chair, gripping the back of it to steady himself. Sebastian Cross watched him closely, waiting for him to process the truth. But Adrian couldn't seem to process it. Instead, he laughed bitterly, shaking his head. You expect me to believe you? Sebastian remained calm. I wouldn't expect you to believe me right away. But I will make sure you see the truth. Adrian's face twisted with rage and confusion. No. This is impossible. Evelyn, she killed my mother. I saw it with my own eyes. Sebastian took a step back, his expression hardening. You saw what you wanted to see. You were blinded by hatred. And with that, Sebastian turned and walked toward the door, leaving Adrian Lancaster standing there, struggling to comprehend the revelation that had just shattered his world. I floated beside Sebastian, my heart pounding as I saw him walk away. Could this be it? Would Adrian Lancaster finally realize the truth? Or was it too late? Adrian Lancaster stood frozen in place, his mind reeling from the words Sebastian Cross had just spoken. His hands clenched into fists as his breath came in shallow gasps. Impossible. It had to be impossible. Everything he had believed for so many years, everything he had built his hatred upon, was suddenly falling apart. His mother's death, the betrayal he had sworn to avenge, the woman he had condemned to hell. Had it all been a lie? His throat felt dry, his chest tightening with something he had refused to acknowledge for years. Doubt. Real, suffocating doubt. His knees nearly buckled as he stumbled toward the door. He had to know. He had to find out the truth for himself. Ignoring the confused looks from his staff, Adrian Lancaster rushed to his car, his fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His mind replayed every cruel word he had ever spoken to Evelyn Sinclair. Every punishment he had inflicted upon her. Every time he had looked into her tear-filled eyes and turned away, believing he was right. But was he? Or had he been the monster all along? His car sped through the streets, his vision blurring with the overwhelming chaos in his mind. There was only one place he needed to go. The cemetery, where Evelyn Sinclair had been buried. His tires screeched against the pavement as he pulled up to the entrance. His legs felt weak, but he forced himself forward, step by step, until he stood before her gravestone. The name engraved into the stone hit him like a punch to the gut. Evelyn Sinclair. Beloved mother. Wronged wife. A woman who had died despised by the man she had once loved. His breath caught in his throat. For the first time he knelt before her grave. His lips parted but no words came out. What could he say? That he was sorry? That he had been wrong? That he wished he could take it all back? Nothing would bring her back. Nothing would erase the pain he had caused. And so, for the first time in years, Adrian Lancaster wept. He wept for his mother. For Lily. For Evelyn. And for himself. For everything he had lost. For everything he had destroyed. Adrian Lancaster knelt before Evelyn Sinclair's grave for what felt like an eternity. The wind howled around him, but he couldn't move. The pain in his chest was suffocating, and the tears that fell onto the cold stone burned like acid. Evelyn. His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. I was wrong. The words felt useless. Meaningless. He had pushed her to her death. He had let Lily die alone. Nothing could change that now. But as the night deepened, the cold began to seep into his bones, forcing him to his feet. Staggering, Adrian turned and walked away from the grave, his body heavy with exhaustion. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he had nowhere left to return to. He found himself wandering aimlessly, his mind blank. At some point, his feet led him back to his mansion. But as soon as he stepped inside, he felt the suffocating emptiness pressing down on him. Everything about this house reminded him of Evelyn and Lily. The echoes of their laughter, the memories of their existence. It was unbearable. Unable to take it, he turned and left again. This time he drove. He didn't even know where he was going until his car screeched to a stop in front of Sebastian Cross's house. I turned to Sebastian Cross, my voice trembling with shock. What's going on? He smiled slightly but didn't answer. Instead, he turned to face Adrian Lancaster, his expression unreadable. Adrian's voice was filled with rage. The private investigator found out everything. You took Evelyn and Lily. Give them back to me. A mocking smirk appeared on Sebastian's face. Fine. Kneel. Adrian pressed his lips together tightly but said nothing. Sebastian laughed coldly. Then forget it. He turned around and started walking away. The next moment, a heavy sound echoed behind him. A thud as knees hit the ground. Both Sebastian and I turned around. The once arrogant and untouchable Adrian Lancaster was now kneeling on the ground. His head hung low, his voice hoarse. Please, give Evelyn and Lily back to me. Sebastian Cross sneered. Huh. I'd be afraid that giving them back to you would taint their journey into the next life. With that, he turned around and walked away. But instead of going home, he took me to an unfamiliar place. I looked at Sebastian, confused, but he simply smiled and remained silent. He led me inside a dimly lit room and pulled back a white sheet. There, lying peacefully, was Lily. She looked just like she was sleeping. I found a mortician friend to restore her body, Sebastian whispered. He clenched his fists. I'm sorry, Evelyn. It's all my fault. If only I had. I shook my head and suddenly knelt before him. You've already done more than enough for us. Then I turned to my daughter. She looked like a little angel, untouched by the cruelty of the world. My hands trembled as I took hers in mine, my voice choking with tears. Sleep well, Lily. Mommy will always be with you. In your dreams, there must be mountains of cotton candy and princess dresses. No one will ever hurt you again. Sebastian remained silent for a long time. Then he spoke softly. Evelyn, you need to decide where she should be buried. Where should she rest? Suddenly, a memory surfaced in my mind. Adrian Lancaster had once mentioned a place. But I didn't want that anymore. Scatter our ashes in Antarctica, I whispered. Lily always wanted to see the penguins. Sebastian Cross hesitated, then nodded. All right. I stood up and bowed deeply to Sebastian. I hadn't expected him to choke up. Tears fell from his eyes onto the floor. I followed his gaze and saw that my feet had become nearly transparent. When I lifted my head, I met Sebastian's bloodshot eyes. Evelyn, I don't want to let you go. I smiled softly. No banquet lasts forever. Sebastian Cross arranged a simple funeral for Lily and me, then scattered our ashes over the icy plains of Antarctica. By then, my body had almost completely faded. A sudden force pulled me away. As I drifted farther and farther, I saw Sebastian standing there, his red eyes following me until I disappeared. Then, in the blink of an eye, I found myself in a prison. Behind the iron bars, Cassandra Vale clawed at the metal window, screaming. Why are you here? The baby was just born. How could you strangle her? You're her father. I turned my head. Adrian Lancaster was standing there, his eyes cold as ice. A bastard deserves to die. This short story has now concluded.